he asked me, and smiled weakly. I smiled back, but I honestly didn't want the young man to risk his life, in case there was something else out there. Then again, someone to watch my six wouldn't hurt at all. I appreciate it. Right, let's go. When we get out there, snag one of the guns. Let's try and look for a radio that one of the soldiers had. Ours can only reach within the facility. We might have a chance of calling out for their backup squad, I told him. Good idea, he replied. We devised a quick plan to get inside Building B and see if there was a communication center, like their headquarters, still intact. Right, you ready? I asked him. He took a huge breath, and I did the same. Alright, let's get out through the window. I'll go first. Watch the area, I said, and we went ahead with our plan to brave the storm and head for Building B. There could be other survivors in there, who might still be armed and willing to kill us. I told this to Jeff, and he said he was ready for anything after what we'd already been through. I had the feeling we both knew this was a risky idea, but we were now in this together no matter what else would be in store for us. If no one else was coming, we had to do something, and we had to do it now. One of the windows was broken, and we could easily fit through it. The jump wouldn't be but 10 feet, so we made it easily out into the cold. It was still dark, but the sun was about to rise, so we had a dim orange glow faintly aiding our sight. We both found rifles and searched for rounds and magazines. Everything was quiet now, save for the howling wind that attacked our senses, and we made our way to the entrance of Building B. The snow was pelting us in the face. We were covered in it by the time we got inside. The opening on the large metal door had caved in from an explosion, so we slipped inside, avoiding the small fires that still blazed menacingly in the wind. Part 4. Once inside, we found out quickly just how awful this atrocity was. Not only were there people shot and left for dead, but there were also bodies torn to shreds and discarded. That thing must have had its way with them because blood caked the walls and bodies lay in a gory mess. Bullet holes and charred marks from more explosions littered the walls and all surfaces. We both just looked at each other in shock. Go on, let's go, I said quietly, and we proceeded forward, because I noticed an opening with some lights that flickered around a corner. We cautiously made our way through and got to a point where it looked like we would finally hit an area of the new construction. The addition was dug out deep below and made into this makeshift science lab. Wires and bulbs that were connected hung up haphazardly to keep the light illuminating this entire area. I could see those large speakers embedded into the rocky walls. Sparks flew from multiple instruments and machines that buzzed or malfunctioned but were neatly stacked in certain areas. There was a large operating table with bolted-down reinforced shackles that lay broken to the side of it. More blood and glass were littered around this area. I even picked up a few documents on the ground, but most were stepped on or covered in filth or blood, too much to even be legible. Scientists and soldiers, both our military and their commanders, were all dead. I was speechless. There were no words to even be said at all. We had just walked into something straight out of a horror film. Right, I'm gonna go and have a look around. Look at those desks. You check that upper level over there, see if you can find a soldier with a radio, I told Jeff, and he agreed, aiming the rifle around and walking away. I made my way towards the set of desks that had computers still booted up. Some were destroyed. I tried messing around with one of them and opening anything that could tell me what they were doing here. Couldn't find anything discernible. Pushing that aside, I moved towards another desk and had a look around. More bodies lay dead on the floor, so I decided to look for a radio. I bent down to one of them, moved his body up to look at me. The soldier had suffered multiple gunshot wounds to the chest and face. Just then, I heard a cough and aimed my weapon at the source of this sudden noise. It was one of their commandos. He was still alive. Well, I had the thought of just opening fire, but I wanted to try and get some answers. His head was slumped forward, leaning against a crate, and I could see his ribcage was poking out through the torn body armor. He must have been in a great deal of pain. I used this to my advantage and approached him. There wasn't a helmet on him, but the hairline was oddly familiar. Right as he looked up at me, I knew it was Calloway, one of the guys that had made me sign the NDA. He spluttered, and blood flew from his mouth, trying to say something to me. I remained motionless, transfixed on this horrifying situation. His arm was twitching, and he attempted to reach for what I assumed was his wound. His arm began moving faster, and just as I realized he was reaching for something else, I snapped back and a muffled boom to my right rang out. Calloway's head caved in. The pistol he'd gone for dropped from his grip and landed to the side. I shouted out and got down on my knee, almost falling on my ass, aiming the rifle around, and found out there was another survivor. One of our guys had a silenced pistol aimed at Calloway and had just saved my life. He must have noticed my security guard patch on my winter coat and made the judgment call that I wasn't a threat. I quickly registered the situation and called out to Jeff, rushing over to the soldier while aiming around to see if anyone else was around, almost in tears at this point. I finally got to him and steadied the man in my arms, noticing his rank. He was the captain for this platoon. Jeff quickly made it over, and the soldier was reaching for his face mask. Jeff then took off the soldier's helmet and face mask for him with ease. There was blood pooling out of his mouth, and he also had severe wounds to the abdomen. Some of the blood got onto my coat and hands, but I didn't care. I needed to hear this man's last words now, or it would be too late. He'd just put his life on the line for this. "Can you speak?" I asked, and he was still coughing up blood quietly. He didn't speak or move at first. He just looked at me with an expression one would only have on the verge of death, and then, with a slow and deliberate motion, he opened his front pouch and felt around for something. I saw his eyes close, but he smiled through the pain. He then frowned, pulled out a small USB port and offered it to me, still coughing. When he did this, my insides flipped, and I instantly asked, "What is this?" Then I took it from his hand. The captain looked up at the ceiling while choking on blood, and merely said, "Everything." As his eyes rolled, his body went still. He took his last breath right there in my arms. There was nothing else to do but gently lay him back to the ground and let the fallen captain rest in peace now. After a passing moment of silence, I took one look at the USB port in my hand and decided on reading this now on one of the computers here. "Jeff, cover me, okay? Look, I know this is reckless, but I need to know what this contains right now. I don't think I can wait." Jeff, as usual, kept quiet and nodded, giving me his stern look again. I made it to a computer and popped it in, with Jeff following. He raised the weapon to study the area periodically, but we couldn't keep our eyes away from the screen. There was a report with some attached files. Once the file transfer was complete, I read it all in one go as quickly as I possibly could. To sum it up, this attack and gathering of information on a certain terrorist organization was called Operation Winter Eyes, and anyone available on call was sent to wipe out the force from a group called TNDA that was found on US soil, otherwise known as the New Dawn Administration. All of what I'm about to share is obviously not meant for civilians to hear about, but all things considered, I really don't give a fuck right now. Throughout reading this, I found out that not only are secrets and advanced technology being kept from the public, but ranks within NASA had been infiltrated by one of these members and gained information about a planet's moon that's never been documented before, well, according to the report. Which planet is not stated. Apparently one of those moons had proof of living organisms residing there. Thermal readings and multiple satellite videos displayed these life forms fully functioning, and people were beyond ecstatic. A team was of course sent out into the outer edge of the planet's rim. The ship sent a team of 14 people, and they came back. But something terrible happened to some of those astronauts, and it was seemingly because of this TNDA group. Records indicate that someone from inside the spacecraft fired off some kind of relay signal that disrupted the life forms from moving and, quite possibly, sustaining their habitat. These creatures were able to somehow collectively reach the NASA spacecraft from the moon and cause damage to the hull. Records indicate the impact on the damage report showed no signs of any cause for losing control out there in space. However, the report stated that several of the life forms housed themselves inside the bodies of some of the astronauts sent out there, and throughout this were able to pilot their way back to Earth. The report indicated that these parasitic anomalies are only capable of feeding, reproducing, and, if housed inside another biological life form for a long enough period of time, can essentially rewire the human genome down to the very last cell within the unfortunate victim's body. They classified the size of the things to be about up to 6 or 7 feet long and were considered as being somewhat similar to Taenia solium, or pork tapeworm. Scientists at the time of containing the initial outbreak were able to use cutting-edge technology to halt the organisms from causing any more harm, and only when the spacecraft came back to the NASA station did researchers find out that this parasite was able to perfectly take over and even mimic the host it's able to feed on or infect with its offspring, which are the microscopic larva-like organisms that infect your organs from the inside and eventually take over by reaching the brain. The organs and limbs are digested and somehow reanimated from within using this substance the larvae collectively secrete that's similar to mucus, and the main parasite can trigger commands through its own cellular network like a hive mind. It can then even intake oxygen like any other human being after a full assimilation, steadily growing larger and larger from within as the feeding continues. How large they can grow isn't documented, but there was a patient zero that was supposed to help them determine that in humans. The scientists were, at one point, able to test these things on animals like dogs, monkeys, and even large reptiles, with results that would make your stomach churn. What was supposed to be a simple gather and collect data mission in space turned out to be something unimaginable, and the man we just saw toss a soldier like it was yesterday's trash? Yes, Patient Zero. Patient Zero had no record of any identity, at least not on this report. Just that he was an astronaut sent out to that planet, and the name was blocked out. He was actually being hauled to a top-secret government prison when TNDA intercepted the smaller military convoy and successfully took the shackled brute to this steel mill, tricking Sam into thinking this was official business somehow. The military tried to track down the group, but were unsuccessful. TNDA decided that this was a golden opportunity and began experiments on the subject immediately here, acquiring all the necessary fake documents to make everything seem legitimate. There was a side note typed out in this section that read, "Possible aid from double agent. Identity unknown." The file also indicated that any other abilities of this organism, while inside a biological life form, were yet to be determined, but thoroughly studied. After more research, they concluded that certain vibrations, frequencies, and sound waves were able to control the organism from within its host, putting it in some sort of stasis. They collected that data from the audio logs of the mission, determining the sound waves on that planet caused them to, in unison, vibrate on the planet's surface and are contained within the atmosphere that way. But the relay signal caused the piercing frequency to occur as they approached the unknown planet before the attack. Whoever figured that out had to be a damn genius. And that would explain the loudspeakers here, and it was recorded that the designated frequency would cause an amount of discomfort in human beings, yet the sound is somehow barely audible. It must have been amplified underground. When introduced to water or certain temperatures, it adapts to the environment without fail, as the cellular structure of these parasitic entities are not fully known to planet Earth. If housed and fed inside the invaded biological organism long enough, the human who fell victim to the parasite would appear the same as the person they were before, but only now all human emotion and empathy would have been devoured. You'd see a shell of the former person that they once were. The report also claims if the limbs are detached or removed, the cellular function within the reanimated body would cause a mutation to occur. Well, that was the only information I could gather from this report on Patient Zero, and these things they found. Anything else is either yet to be documented, or the government and TNDA know more. However now, since some assholes in the fuck-up doomsday cult disturb the natural order in the solar system, we now know that these things make contact with humans and can remain housed comfortably inside a life form and live like a twisted puppeteer sent from outer space. TNDA also had done their own studies, but I couldn't find any information in this building. How to exterminate these things has yet to be documented. With all this in mind, there was another attached file that explained how one of the underground hives and facilities under direct command of the United States government had, in fact, been compromised at one point as well, thus turning over a plethora of information, as well as access to a certain satellite unit's mainframe. This sole perpetrator had posed as a researcher and escaped with all of this classified intelligence. They made the connection that, since that top member gained access to certain satellites, they assumed that he or she used some kind of jammer to block them from tracking their location after the capture of Patient Zero and fooling the military. The man or woman in question is known to be a figurehead in this terrorist group, and their identity is yet to be verified. The only alias they've uncovered is a single name, Goldstein, and from what the military gathers, plans on using diseases and even create bioweapons to infiltrate certain military compounds and trigger an apocalyptic event to capitalize on. Surprisingly, over the years this group gained quite the following in the underground world of this country. Ex-Secret Service agents and even grunts for the Marines were blacklisted, and it stated that cults were being formed with agents spreading the influence all over the planet. All of these targets and enemies of the state. The report also mentioned a steel mill owner getting killed after speaking to a scientist over a radio transmission, informing the scientist of roof access. Sam is now dead because he tried to tell someone about TNDA. Ray really had overheard one of those assholes telling Sam about the dig, and probably more we didn't know about. Ray, that lucky bastard, was at home. Well, I'm glad. Wait until he gets a load of this, I thought to myself. What a merry frickin' Christmas this turned out to be. After reading through all of this, Jeff and I stood for a long moment and stared at the computer screen, displaying images of men that had no idea they were being photographed. Men in suits getting into luxurious vehicles with a security detail. What looked to be a team of researchers or astronauts at NASA. And these monstrous experiments the military conducted on animals, I could clearly see what they did to Patient Zero. They sliced him apart and reattached him time and time again to get their data. Jeff and I decided to get the hell out of Dodge. We found Sam's old company truck nearby with the keys still in his office. Thank God there was still enough gas in there to just get onto the main road and get out of there. We got in with me driving and took off down the road and past the burning helicopter. Once we made it onto the main road, there was a military Humvee on fire near a trail that snakes off by the main road as well. It was undoubtedly one of their checkpoints that got overrun in case the battle was in their favor and civilians came around. Knowing that this place was housed in the middle of nowhere, and people were rarely seen around here, I had to wonder if people could even hear the explosions and gunfire, or even if the world was listening at all, probably distracted by their phones and devices. If they had thermals watching us from above, they let us escape because I never got stopped, nor did I stop driving until we were far away from that nightmare. This just made me wonder even more. One thing that stuck out is when I took a glance in the rearview mirror. I almost stopped the vehicle. Before I even had the thought to even slow down, Jeff had said something that snapped me back to staying alive. "Keep driving." After he said this, I only nodded and sped up, because one of our soldiers was standing on the road watching us drive away from the steel mill, with his stomach entirely emptied. Part 6. This was over a month ago now. I haven't even watched the news or gone online, just assumed the attack was completely covered up as an accident or something. This is the first time since the ordeal that I've been online. I haven't heard anything from Jeff or Ray. Jeff asked me to drop him off somewhere near his house after that, and I decided to keep moving from place to place. I doubted they'd just leave me alone, so I decided to keep running, and keep that US Bort and the soldier with me, for the time being at least. Well, I'm being followed now. I know it. It was only a matter of time before I either slipped up, or they were just able to find me. Unfortunately, like a paranoid moron, I slipped up by using that USB port on my laptop. I quickly grabbed it from home, along with a few important items. Well, I just wanted to confirm again that what I was seeing wasn't just some hallucination. But, well, it triggered something. A failsafe or whatever. And in bold words, a message popped up. This device is being compromised. Well, I just panicked, smashing the thing and my laptop to pieces right there in my hotel room, and I quickly darted out of there. I'd already paid for 2 nights, but it was time to move on. I don't know who to trust. Maybe I should just let the military capture me. But I just panicked and destroyed the USB. Even if the military is trying to get to me, I don't know if I want that kind of involvement right now, after I just destroyed a piece of their equipment and ran from the facility. They've already shown me the carnage and lengths they go to seemingly to cover this up. Imagine what they might do to me. Well, I'm not only paranoid, but terrified beyond words, and I've considered just taking my own life after I post this story here. Maybe the military will help after all. Don't really know if I want to take any chances, though. Normally I wouldn't take such drastic measures, but I'm just a nobody anyway, and whatever they have in store for me might just be worse. Well, before I sign off, I said I was being followed, sure, but the TNDA or the military isn't the only force I'm worried about. That thing escaped from the steel mill, and there was another topic that went over my head throughout everything I'd taken in. These things are capable of infecting a host, and the soldier that was being gripped by Patient Zero had to have been completely taken over by now. I keep seeing these people randomly appear before me throughout my time of running. They'd be standing somewhere, eerily watching me from a distance. Be a different person every time. I'd notice them, and they wouldn't move a muscle. They'd just remain still with their eyes fixed on me no matter where I'd go. I'd walk through a crowd of people, drive somewhere, take a risk and grab a bite or a drink somewhere, and boom, there they would be. Faces fixed in a blank expression, focused on me and me only. Somewhere either outside a window or even close by, being mere feet away. Well, if these things can somehow perfectly blend in with society, then we need to know. I can imagine you'd want to be kept in the dark about something like this, let alone fall victim to one of these things. And if TNDA somehow captures this monstrosity again, then who knows what might happen. Well, it's late in the morning, and I'm currently held up in some shitty hotel room yet again, paying cash and not using my card or real name for anyone to track. I've taken to drinking again, and eat sleeping pills like candy every night to attempt at blocking out my night terrors. Wow, didn't even realize how long this had gotten. Even so, when you go through something traumatic, reliving the experience can become easy. I honestly don't know where else to go. So to whoever actually takes the time and listens to this, just know one thing. Something beyond our wildest imagination exists out there, and there's nothing we can do about it. Let this be a warning to those